The bell above the door of the Skylark Diner chimed a cheerful, tinny note that was entirely out of place with the man who had just entered. He was large, not in a soft, overfed way, but in a dense, weathered manner, like an old oak that had withstood 1,000 storms. A leather cut, worn at the shoulders and frayed at the seams, was stretched across his broad back, adorned with a single, intricate patch of a sentinel standing guard over a winding road. Tattoos snaked from beneath the cuffs of his shirt, dark ink on sun-beaten skin. He moved with a quiet economy, his heavy boots making almost no sound on the checkered linoleum floor as he slid into a booth in the corner, the one with the cracked red vinyl that everyone else avoided. The ambient chatter of the diner, a comfortable morning hum of clinking cutlery and low conversation, faltered. Eyes flickered toward the corner booth, and then quickly away. Husbands shifted in their seats. Wives subtly checked their purses. He didn't seem to notice, or perhaps he was simply accustomed to being the sudden center of unspoken attention. He picked up the plastic-coated menu, his gaze scanning it with an unreadable placidity. Sarah approached the table, her order pad in hand. She'd been at the Skylark for 8 years, long enough to read the mood of a room like a weather forecast. Right now, a low-pressure system had settled directly over booth 7. She offered a tight, professional smile. "Morning. What can I get for you?" "Coffee, black. Slice of the apple pie," he said. His voice was a low gravel, calm and even. He didn't meet her eyes, his attention still on the menu as if it held some fascinating secret. "Coming right up," she said, turning away before her professional mask could crack. She didn't like the tension he'd brought into the room, the way Mrs. Henderson was clutching her pearls, and the 2 salesmen by the window had stopped talking about quarterly reports. People like him were a disruption, a stone tossed into the placid pond of a weekday morning. She was pouring his coffee when Stan, the manager, emerged from the back office. Stan was a man who puffed his chest out to appear bigger than he was, his authority resting on a cheap tie and the power to sign paychecks. He saw the biker, and his face, already pinched with the perpetual state of minor irritation, soured completely. He strode across the floor, his movements loud and purposeful, a clear signal to the rest of the diner that he was taking control. "I'm gonna have to ask you to leave," Stan said, his voice loud enough for every patron to hear. He didn't speak to the biker, but at him, as if addressing a stray dog that had wandered in. The biker looked up from his menu slowly, his eyes, a surprisingly clear shade of blue, finally meeting Stan's. He said nothing. "We have a certain clientele here," Stan continued, emboldened by the man's silence. "Families. Decent people. Your kind. It's bad for business. So, finish up and get out." He gestured vaguely toward the door with a dismissive flick of his wrist. A flush of heat crept up Sarah's neck. This was different. Stan was a jerk. Everyone knew that, but this was a public humiliation. The man hadn't done a thing. He'd ordered pie. She glanced around the room. The other customers were watching, a captive audience to Stan's petty power play. Some looked uncomfortable, but most wore faint expressions of approval, relieved that the perceived threat was being handled. It was that complicity that made her stomach turn. Before she could stop herself, the words were out. "Stan, he's a paying customer. He hasn't done anything wrong." Stan's head whipped around, his eyes narrowing on her. "Excuse me? Are you the manager now, Sarah? Are you telling me how to run my business in front of my customers?" "No, I just think—" "I know what you think," he snapped, his voice rising. "You think you can undermine me. Well, you're done. Get your apron off, collect your tips, and get out. You're fired." The diner fell into a profound silence, broken only by the hum of the coffee machine. Sarah stood frozen, the coffee pot still in her hand, the heat of it seeping through the handle. Fired. Just like that. After 8 years of split shifts, needy customers, and putting up with Stan's Napoleon complex. In the corner booth, the biker slowly rose to his feet. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a worn leather wallet, and laid a crisp $20 bill on the table, more than enough for the coffee and pie he'd never receive. He looked at Stan, his expression giving nothing away. Then, his gaze shifted to Sarah. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod, a small acknowledgement that passed between them in the silent, charged room. Then he turned and walked out, the bell over the door chiming his departure, leaving Sarah alone in the wreckage of her career. The next morning, Sarah was sitting at her small kitchen table, staring at a stack of bills in a thin classified section from the local paper. The shock had worn off, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. Waitressing was all she knew. The Skylark, for all its flaws, had been her stability. Now, it was just a bitter memory. At that same moment, the bell over the door of the Skylark diner chimed. Stan, preening behind the counter and basking in the glow of what he considered a decisive victory, looked up. His self-satisfied smile vanished. It was him, the biker, and he wasn't alone. He was flanked by 2 other men. They wore leather, but it was different. The man on his right was older, his graying hair pulled back in a neat tail. His jacket was clean, worn over a pressed, button-down shirt. He had the sharp, intelligent eyes of a hawk. The man on his left was younger, with a lean, athletic build. He carried a slim leather briefcase and wore polished riding boots that looked more expensive than Stan's entire wardrobe. They didn't look for a table. They walked in formation, a silent, purposeful trio, and stopped directly in front of Stan at the counter. I thought I made myself clear yesterday, Stan began, trying to summon the bluster from the day before, but it came out thin and reedy. The older, gray-haired man cut him off before he could build any momentum. His voice was calm, articulate, and carried a weight that made Stan's feel like cheap tin. Mr. Stanley Miller? The formal use of his name was disarming. Yeah. Who are you? The younger man placed his briefcase on the counter and unlatched it with 2 precise clicks. He didn't seem like a biker. He seemed like a surgeon or a lawyer. My name is David Chen, he said, his tone clinical. I serve as legal counsel for Iron Century Holdings, LLC. This, he gestured to the older man, is Marcus Vance, our chief operating officer, and you've already met our president. He nodded toward the biker who stood silently between them, a formidable, unmoving anchor. Stan's mind struggled to connect the words. LLC, counsel, president. He looked at the man he'd thrown out yesterday, the greasy biker. President? It didn't make any sense. What is this? Some kind of joke? David Chen ignored the question. He withdrew a thick, professionally bound document from his briefcase and slid it across the counter. The paper was heavy, the printing crisp. This is a legally executed purchase offer for this property. Parcel 4B, including the structure, all attached fixtures, and the business assets of the Skylark Diner. Stan let out a short, choked laugh. You're crazy. This place isn't for sale. Now get out of here before I call the cops. That's where you're mistaken, David said, his voice never rising. The property, Mr. Miller, is owned by the Albright Family Trust, administered by First National Commerce Bank. You are a lessee. Your commercial lease agreement is, in fact, up for renewal in 60 days. He paused, letting the words sink in. The trust was contacted yesterday afternoon. They were informed of your numerous health and safety code violations over the past 24 months. The faulty wiring in the kitchen, the persistent leak in the rear storage area. Violations you were contractually obligated to report to them and did not. Faced with the prospect of a difficult renewal with a problematic tenant, the trustees were quite receptive to a fair market, all-cash offer that would allow them to liquidate the asset without complication. Stan's face had gone the color of spoiled milk. The violations. He'd been paying the fines, kicking the can down the road, assuming the out-of-state trust would never notice. Iron Century Holdings submitted that offer at 4 p.m. yesterday, David continued, a relentless metronome of facts. The trust accepted it via electronic signature at 8:45 a.m. this morning. Your landlord, Mr. Miller, is no longer the Albright Trust. It's us. The clatter of forks and knives in the diner had ceased. Every patron was frozen, listening intently. This was better than television. So, the document in front of you, Marcus, the COO, spoke for the first time, his voice a low, resonant rumble, is not an offer to buy the building. That's already done. This is our offer to buy you out. Your business name, your inventory, your equipment. A formality to make the transition clean. David tapped the cover of the document. We've based our offer on a generous multiple of the net profit declared on your last 3 years of tax filings. It is, frankly, more than the depreciated assets are worth. You sign the agreement, you accept the certified check attached to the final page, and you walk away. You have until noon today to decide. If you decline, we will simply allow your lease to expire in 60 days. At that point, we will serve you with eviction papers, and you will leave with nothing but the contents of your office and your used cooking equipment. The choice is yours. Defeated, Stan stared at the three men. His little kingdom, built on greasy spoons and petty tyranny, had been dismantled with legal paperwork in less than 24 hours. He looked at the biker, the president, who stood watching him, his blue eyes as steady and impassive as they had been yesterday. This was all because of him, because Stan had decided he didn't belong. He had judged the book by its cover, and had just learned that the cover was bound in worn leather, but the pages within were written in the dense, indecipherable language of corporate law and high finance. Who are you people? Stan whispered, the question hanging in the thick silence. It was the biker who finally answered, his voice quiet, but carrying to every corner of the room. We're the new owners. He pointed a single, tattooed finger at the signature line on the document. Sign the papers, Stan. It wasn't a command filled with anger. It was a simple statement of the inevitable, a period at the end of a sentence that had been written the moment Stan had opened his mouth yesterday. With a trembling hand, Stan reached for the pen. He saw the signature already on the buyer's line, a bold, confident script above the typed name, M. Callahan, President. He looked up at the biker, at Callahan, and finally understood. He hadn't been dismissing a man. He'd been dismissing an institution. The transaction was completed with a chilling efficiency. David Chen produced a notary stamp from his briefcase and finalized the document. He slid a certified check across the counter, the numbers on it making Stan's head swim. It was a lot of money, but it felt like a pittance for his life's work. A transition team will be here tomorrow morning at 7 to begin inventory, David said, packing his things away. You have until 5 p.m. today to remove any personal effects. The three men turned and walked toward the door. Stan was left behind his counter, a ghost in his own diner. The regulars stared, their mouths agape, trying to reconcile the image of the outlaw biker with the corporate titan who had just executed a flawless takeover. As they reached the door, Callahan paused. He pulled a sleek smartphone from the inside pocket of his leather cut, a jarringly modern piece of technology against the worn material. He tapped the screen and lifted it to his ear. In her small, quiet apartment, Sarah's phone buzzed on the table next to the classifieds. An unknown number. She almost ignored it, but some impulse made her answer. "Hello." "Sarah?" The voice was the low gravel she remembered from the diner. "It's the man you tried to help yesterday." She sat bolt upright, her heart thudding. "Oh, hello. She didn't know what to say. "I have a business proposition for you," he said, his tone direct and all business. "The Skylark Diner is under new management as of about 5 minutes ago. My management." Sarah's mind reeled. She couldn't form a coherent thought. "What? How?" "I need a new general manager," he went on, ignoring her question. "Someone who knows the business, knows the regulars, and isn't afraid to do the right thing when it's hard. I saw you make a choice yesterday, Sarah. You stood up to a bully and it cost you your job. That's character. That's the kind of person I want running my investment." He let that sink in for a moment before continuing. "The position is yours if you want it. Full operational authority. You'll hire your own staff. We're offering a 20% salary increase over what Stan was paying you, plus performance-based profit sharing. We're also closing for 2 weeks for a full renovation. New kitchen, new wiring, new roof. Everything by the book." She was breathless, clutching the phone. You did all this? You bought the diner just because of what Stan did to me? To you?" There was a brief pause on the line, the sound of distant traffic in the background. "Stan made a poor business decision," Callahan said, his voice measured and completely devoid of pride or anger. "He alienated a customer and fired a valuable employee in a public display of incompetence. My organization specializes in identifying undervalued assets suffering from poor management. Yesterday, the Skylark moved to the top of our list. Your actions didn't cause this, Sarah. They just revealed an opportunity. You showed me the diner had one asset worth keeping. Stan was just throwing it away. That was it. The entire staggering event boiled down to a single, cold principle. It wasn't personal revenge. It was business. It was justice, delivered not by a fist, but by a flawlessly executed contract. "Do you want the job, Sarah?" he asked again. A slow smile spread across her face, the first genuine one in 24 hours. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Yes, I absolutely do." "Good. David Chen will call you within the hour to arrange the paperwork. Be at the diner tomorrow, 8 a.m. sharp. He'll have your keys." The line went dead. Outside, Callahan slid his phone back into his pocket. Marcus gave him a solid clap on the shoulder. "David." Chen nodded, a look of quiet, professional satisfaction on his face. They swung their legs over their motorcycles, the morning sun glinting off the polished chrome. The engines roared to life in perfect thundering unison, a sound that shook the windows of the diner. Then, without a single backward glance, they pulled out into traffic and were gone. 3 riders disappearing into the flow of the world, just men with business to attend to.